Okay guys, so what we have here is the Sinister Shimano Scorpion DC. Now this is the reel that the DAIWA TATULA SV wants to be when it grows up. And of course the special thing about this reel is the super advanced Intelligent DC5 brake system. So for those of you who are not familiar with Shimano's DC brakes, basically there's a microprocessor inside this reel that controls electromagnets to slow the spool down. And only slows the spool down only when it senses an overrun. So that's the reason why DC reels cast so good despite having heavy spools. Okay, so what we have here is a set of Spool high-speed bearings. Now these bearings were sent to me courtesy of a subscriber who actually put his money where his mouth is and had these sent to me because he actually wanted a test done on this Scorpion DC. So yeah, so they came in the mail, and let's talk about these bearings real quick. Now these bearings have been around, I think, for at least a year. A lot of people have emailed me, commented in my comment section, wanting me to do a test on these bearings. So I did my research. I looked at several videos on YouTube, and I went on Spool Speed's website, and I really didn't see anything special about them enough to warrant me buying a set and testing them out. Now, there was a company a few years ago, and they're still around. They're called Boca bearings, and they have what they call the orange seal bearings. So a lot of you younger kids probably don't remember, but about 10 years ago, Boca bearings came on the scene, and there were a lot of people hyped over those bearings, doing YouTube videos where, you know, they fill their spool up with line and they would spin them on video, and they would spin for like an hour. Now you can actually do that with the stock bearings when the spool's full of line as well, but you know, it is what it is. So I didn't see anything different between these bearings and those Boca bearings, to be honest. And of course I went on Spool Speed's YouTube page, and I saw the guy casting all the line off of an ALDEBARAN 50 using 10-pound line. He did the same thing with a METANIUM MGL, and he did it one-handed. Now that seems impressive, but there was some smoke and mirrors involved there. Now, first of all, he was casting with the wind to his back. You can see it was really windy. Second of all, he was using a really heavy topwater lure that flies through the air really good. And I think that topwater lure was probably like at least 1 ounce. And third of all, I should say, he was using really shallow spooled reels. You know, the ALDEBARAN 50, I can cast a line off of that reel, no problem. The METANIUM MGL, the JDM 70 model, I saw that he was using that. But a few days ago, I was on Instagram and I saw him do the same thing to a LEWS Pro TI that had a much deeper spool. So I'm very interested to see if these Spool Speed bearings will help. As you can see, it says these are ceramic hybrid, more casting and less effort. Now I will say on Spool Speed's website, they do mention that the inner races were micro polished. Maybe that helped. And there were of course several videos done by other YouTubers where the casting distance was increased. Now the thing with DC reels, a lot of people say that getting upgraded bearings will not help a Shimano DC reel for a couple of reasons. Now the first reason is that Shimano's stock bearings for their higher end reels like this are really, really good. There's no need to really upgrade, maybe just clean them out. and they'll work just as good as any other aftermarket bearing out there. And the second reason is that the braking system will not allow the spool to spin any faster than a certain preset point. It's basically what some of these know-it-alls think, that once the microprocessor senses a certain speed, it'll automatically slow the spool down, so the bearings will not help because of the brake system. Now, I think the way that the DC brakes work is that, of course, the brakes are applied only when it senses an overrun, but the amount of magnetic force applied is going to be different. So basically, if you have it set to a stronger brake force setting, then the magnetic force applied will be stronger when the brakes are applied versus something on a lower setting. So that's my theory. And I come to that theory because of the way the automatic mode works on this reel. Okay, so there's only really one way to find out though. That of course is to get out on the field. Now, I was going to do this test last week, but I ran into a problem. Now, swapping the bearings on the DC reel is a complicated process. So let me show you why. That bearing down there is tucked underneath this brake system, so you have to actually pull this brake system out and apart to get to that bearing. And you have to do it by undoing these 3 screws, and there's several pieces involved. There's the line selector piece right there, and then there's the latch that you use to open up the side plate. Now, apparently there's a piece in there that fell out last week that I couldn't find. Now, luckily I found it a couple of days later on the floor, that I was able to assemble this thing back in working order, because I was pissed off when I couldn't find that piece. So yeah, I'm gonna have to go out and do the surgery on this reel out in my car and not in a controlled environment like this room here. So wish me luck, and I will see you guys out on the field. Okay guys, so first up is the Scorpion DC with the stock bearings. Now, internally I have the line mode set to PE or braid, and I have the external dial set to the lowest setting of 1. And I have spool tension set to just minimize the side-to-side play. And we are doing a 1/2 ounce casting plug. Now, the rod is a 6'6" medium heavy. I think it's a fast action. And let's see what happens. "208 feet 2 inches. "201 feet 9 inches. "203 feet 6 inches. "207 feet even. Okay guys, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a few casts in the automatic mode, because I know that mode is probably what most people are going to use 95% of the time when they have a Scorpion DC. So here we go. 160 feet 9 inches. $163 feet 6 inches. $153 3 inches. Okay guys, so I've successfully installed both spool speed bearings, and we're going to start off with the line setting, of course, to braid, and the external dial set to 1, which is the minimum amount of braking. Now these bearings are loud as hell. I'm running them without the shields, but let's see what happens. One net, 198 feet 2 inches. Whew. 213 feet 6 inches. $213 feet 9 inches. $198 feet even. Okay guys, now it's time for the cast with the spool speed bearings in automatic mode. So here we go. $158 feet 5 inches. $150 feet 6 inches. $143 feet 10 inches. Okay guys, we are back from the casting field and testing out the spool speed bearings to see if they would help a Shimano DC reel cast farther versus stock bearings. Of course, that's the Scorpion DC. Now before we get into these interesting results, I got to go over a couple of things. Now it was a day where it was just, you know, intermittent scattered thunderstorms. So several times during the testing I had to stop and pack up and take cover because a rainstorm would come through and then it would quickly pass and I would go back out and reset up everything, and then another one would come through. So I was interrupted several times, so that's why I kind of cut the casting short to 4 casts for the #1 setting and then 3 casts for the automatic setting. Okay, now also to get the maximum performance out of these bearings, what I also did was I ran them no shields and I ran them dry, meaning I didn't put any kind of lubrication or oil in them. So I don't know if you can see down there, but there are no shields. Now they do come with shields, these lime green shields that you can install. But yeah, so let's get to these results. As you know, all casts were done in the longest internal casting mode possible, which is braid or PE. So when I had the external dial set to 1, which is the lowest setting available, the stock bearings averaged 205.25 feet, while the spool speed bearings averaged 206 feet. So technically the spool speed bearings did beat out the stock bearings by less than a foot, 0.75 feet. Now the stock bearings were more consistent. Every single cast was over 200 feet, while the spool speed bearings did hit longer casts on a couple of casts. I think they were at 213 feet, but then they were inconsistent and there were a couple of casts that were under 200 feet. So I'm not sure what happened there, but I will tell you this: the spool speed bearings did have the benefit of a little bit more backwind than the stock bearings. And on one particular practice cast, there was a lot of backwind. I hit 234 feet with the spool speed bearings, but unfortunately you could not duplicate that in the actual measured testing. Okay, so when I put the external dial to automatic mode, the stock bearings averaged 159.3 feet, while the spool speed bearings averaged 151 feet. So looking at a 8.3 foot victory for the stock bearings. So the reason I did those casts in automatic mode was to get a more complete picture of what these spool speed bearings are capable of, and I also wanted to see what kind of a distance gap they would be versus, you know, number 1 on the external dial. And there was a big difference. You're looking at over 50 feet in some instances. So yeah, what does that tell us? Now, it's told us something that's been told to us before, that Shimano's JDM SARB bearings are so good that you will not get any kind of performance, well, real world performance gain by upgrading to ceramic hybrids. And we've done this test before with METANIUM 2 times, and there was literally no increase in casting performance. And if I was to, you know, clean these bearings, soak them in acetone overnight, and maybe even run them without shields, I think we would see the stock bearings probably beat these spool speed bearings pretty convincingly. But that's for another test. Okay, so a couple of things here, a couple of notes. Now, one thing with the spool speed bearings is they are loud, super loud. I don't know if you can tell, but on a lot of those casts, the noise of these bearings drowned out that sweet DC sound for most of the cast. So keep that in mind if you were thinking of getting these or any other ceramic hybrids. But these were louder than any other ceramic hybrids that I can remember testing. And you would lose a lot of smoothness, meaning the casting was not as smooth. I could feel the bearings vibrate, and then even on the retrieving in that plug, you could tell the retrieve was not as smooth as well, which was kind of strange. So yeah, there's that. Now, if I put a drop of oil in each bearing and ran them with the shields, would that quiet things down and smoothen things up? Probably, more than likely, yeah. But that would also slow these bearings down and would decrease the cast distance. So it's kind of a win-lose situation there. Okay, so there's a couple of good things about the spool speed bearings. Now, while they did stand up to the stock bearings, these things are actually cheaper than a set of stock bearings, and actually cheaper than a set of competitor bearings like the Boca Orange Seals. Now, on Spool Speed's website, these 2 bearings were only $17. Now, compared to a set of Bokehs which claim, you know, an ABEC 7 rating. Those were $30 to $40. And I forget the price of the stock Shimano bearings, but it was more than 17 bucks for two. Now, Spool Speed does not list an ABEC rating on their website for these bearings or on this packaging, so I don't know if there's an ABEC rating on these or not. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is I'm going to see if these Spool Speed bearings will help out a cheaper reel that does not have those nice SARBs that Shimano gives its JDM reels. And that reel is going to be a Shimano CURADO I. Now I think this will be a great test because a ton of people have this reel and they still have this reel as well, even with the release of the CURADO K. And these reels have Shimano's plain Jane stainless steel ball bearings, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think these are anti-rust, and as you can see, these are pretty greased up from the factory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to soak these bearings in acetone and take them back out in the field and do the exact same test with the CURADO I that I just did with the Scorpion, but with clean bearings. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see a gain in performance when you're looking at these lower end reels with these lower spec bearings. But for now, despite all the hype and all the videos that you see on YouTube, I could not get a increase in performance with these Spool Speed bearings for the Shimano Scorpion DC. And there was even a loss of distance in the automatic mode. So I hope that helps out Scorpio, and maybe he'll chime in the comment section and give us his results, because he has a Scorpion DC that he puts Spool Speed bearings in as well. Okay guys, thanks a lot.